Now we're ready to talk about putting the two pads together and making what's called the H-style menstrual pad. But I wanted to take a minute before I do that and talk about what happens when you get to the end of your pad. You've gone all the way around, and remember I had to attach on because my string was a little too short. Now you really do need to make sure that knot is secure. I put a knot in my string I think it was about that far from the end. I put the knot there and then ran it through, and so I had a long tail. One tail was left from my string that ran out, and then I made a new tail which also had a knot. Then I was able to tie them in a square knot. So if you don't know how to do a square knot, I'm going to recommend that you look that up on the internet, and there will be very good help on that. And I did a double. I don't know if you can see it. The camera may not allow us to zoom in that well, I don't know. But you can see it's a pretty good size knot, but this is not next to the body, so it isn't going to bother anything being there. And when we get to the end, you know, I sewed all the way around, and now I'm at the end. We don't want this coming apart, you know, 1 year into use. This should last for, you know, several, maybe 5-6 years. So let's do this. Let's run our string, our needle through, and leave a loop. All right. Some of you may know how to do this, and that's okay, but for those who don't know, that's why I'm going to cover it here. Now I'm going to come back again, very close to where I came out on the other side. See that? All right, I'm going to come back, and before that loop pulls shut, I'm going to put my needle through it. So I am making a knot. Can you see how that's making a knot? And I'm going to do that several times. I'll do it again. And I actually did it once before I started the video. So I'm going to recommend 3, again, because we're hoping people can use these for, you know, what would 12 times 6 laundries, you know, washing, and that would assume they only wore it once during their cycle, you know, so this is going to get a lot of wear and a lot of washing. So let's just be sure that our sewing doesn't come apart. Now, what I'm going to do, I am going to run my needle. See, it's not coming out the other side. It's in between, down inside here. I'm going to run it through there. The reason I'm doing that, I want to leave a tail, but I don't want that tail hanging out, okay? So I've got my scissor, and now I'm going to cut it, and look, it's totally hidden. You can't see that tail, but we know it's this long because that's how long it was when I cut it. Okay? Now, yes, we have raw edges. That's okay. This fabric will all, you know, some of the stuff will slough off after it's worn and washed a couple times, but then it'll stop doing that, and this is going to last a good long time. All right, now, on the second one, because I'll have some people watching who do have a sewing machine, I went ahead and I stitched it up using a nylon thread. You can see on the back side. I also did zigzag. This is not a necessary step, and if you're watching your costs, I'm going to recommend don't bother with it. It really isn't necessary. All of this fabric will fray to a certain point, and then it will stop, and you'll just have nice soft edges. But I just wanted to demonstrate that there are going to be some who are going to want to do this. Some people are selling these to individuals who are used to what I would call the finer things in life, and so they're going to have, you know, a mental hurdle about an unfinished edge. So, you know, if that's your case, then just go ahead and finish it. You can use a simple zigzag, or if you happen to have a serger, use a serger. I am going to say that if you look at my stitching here, these are very close together, which makes the edge stiff. I'm going to recommend that you relax that to the longest stitch that your serger makes. And the same, I have a sample somewhere here. Sorry about all the turning. Okay, underneath this you can see I started out with a tiny zigzag, and that makes it very stiff. So instead, get a much looser, relaxed stitch. It's still going to be a stiff edge, which, you know, for me, I am a tactile sensitive person, so I don't prefer that. I just prefer comfort over what my pad looks like, because I'm personally of the opinion nobody's going to see it. I hope, you know, unless it's a neighbor that's helping with my laundry. But anyway, so now we have these two. When they're worn, they're going to be stacked on top of each other like that. So I will admit that if you had two full absorbency pads like this on top of each other, that is pretty thick. Would be wonderful for nightwear. You know, there's just nothing more frustrating than to wake up and find out that you had a bleed through all over your bedding. So these would be a wonderful example of night. Not so great for day where, especially for young girls, they don't need this much coverage. Again, you know, possibly you have one poor girl who's got really heavy bleeding, and then this would be good for her. But for the others, you can make one wing of the H-style pad to just be a light use wing. So possibly, you know, you always have to have the barrier, and then you could do just the terry cloth or just the flannel. So, you know, this could maybe just be that little bit that gets her through the rest of the day, because the beauty of the H-style pad is that during the day, you know, you've used this one and, you know, you're just feeling like you need a refresh. You can just go to the bathroom, lift this one up, move this one out of the way, put this one back down, and then have this one on top, and this will be fresh. So, you know, sometimes that just mentally makes you feel a little better. So that's the benefit to the H-style. In addition, it does sit in the panty and stay put. So how do we get it to be an H-style? First of all, because these are going to sit on top of each other, we need the bridge, which is the piece that connects them, to be at least as wide as the pad. It can't be smaller because it won't reach over the other pad, right? It'll make one of them curl. So what we're going to do is this is scraps left over from making the back, all right? What I'm going to do is I need it to be this full size, but I have to attach it to the pad, right? So I'm going to have it laying over the pad like that on both sides. So I can take and I'll mark, this would be my spot. Maybe I'll put a pin, that would help. All right, so let's put a pin there. But you could just mark it with a pencil. Pen might work on fleece. Now I know I have to go over this much. I'm going to move my pin one more time. And then I'm going to do it a second time. Okay, so now I know I have allowed for what I would call the overlay. So I can just lay this here and cut. Now I know it's wide enough. You really could just sew it on just the way it is, but you know, I have noticed that the one side is a little wider than the other. So I'm just going to trim that little bit off. This is not a necessary step. You don't have to be quite that fussy. All right, now I am going to center that on my pad. So one easy way to find center without having to use a measuring tool and doing math is we can do like this. Actually, if I let me think about this a second. There we go. If I lay them side by side like that, center of my bridge, center of my pad, then I can just bring this up, grab my pin, and I know that is perfectly centered. Look at all that. That will stop happening. And of course, you know, before you are giving these to other people, or especially before you're selling them, you're going to clean that off. Okay. All right. Now, the other one is real easy to find center. If I've got any kind of something square, you could lay a book here. You know, you could lay a piece of paper here. It doesn't matter. Watch. If I lay that here, make sure this is going straight across. Then I can lay my pad, making sure that they're going straight across up here. And if I'm not 100% positive that I've got that guy in the right spot, you know, I happen to have a grid underneath it, and look, I was off a little bit, but I can move my paper and then get the top lining up. You see how I just a small little wiggle. All right. So let's pin that on. And now we're going to take our needle and thread. There's several ways you can make a knot at the end of your needle. There's a really clever one where you wrap it around your needle and then run it through. Maybe we'll do that the next time. So I am making sure that my knot at the end of my string is going to be on this side of the pad, not on the wearing side. All right, so I'm going to move my pin out of the way. And I don't really need to go through all the layers, we're just attaching this, and this isn't going to have, you know, a lot of strain or stress on it, so, but I am still using that back movement locking stitch. Back stitch, I meant to look that up before doing this video just to make sure you had the right term, but how about one of my students go look that up and come and tell me the right name for it? That's a good assignment, isn't it? One of the challenges to hand stitching is keeping the other pieces out of your way, not having a tangled up mess. All right, but my ladies in Zambia who are learning sewing are going to be expert hand stitching artists. So they can come and give me a lesson on some of my hand stitching techniques so I can improve. Everybody can improve no matter how old you are. There is always something you can learn. I don't think a week goes by that I haven't learned something new in the sewing world, because I make a habit of looking at things online. Sometimes I pick up old books from the 1940s if I can find them and read things, because they knew things that we have forgotten. Now, does anybody remember how we're going to end this off? I could go all the way through. Maybe I should actually, just to be extra secure. But I'm going to do what? Leave a loop. I like to stick my finger in that loop just to make sure I don't have too much adventure. Okay, coming back. Now I'm going to put my needle through that loop. And when I do that 2 more times, I will have a very secure knot at the end of this. Through the loop. That time, you see, I just left a really big loop and didn't put my finger through it. There's multiple ways to do things. You know, you find the one that you like best for you. On the 3rd time, I'm having to use my table to push that needle because I've got a lot of sewing in one spot. Might need a needle puller. There we go. Okay. You do want to be careful doing this step because sometimes your string is going to really want to cause a knot. And that's not much fun when that happens. So now remember, I'm running it to the inside of the pad so that I can leave a tail. If you leave a tail, it's less likely to come undone. And notice how you can see that a little bit right there. I'm going to make that disappear by pulling on the fleece, or try to anyway. Well, he's resisting my efforts. There we go. Okay, so then we will repeat that on the other side. And for the sake of the video, I'm going to do that off camera. Once it's done, the way you put this on is you would have your panty. I'm going to pretend this is the crotch of my panty right here. And the panties are on my leg. My legs are down on either side of this part of my panty. Okay, you need the fleece side facing up toward you. And I know this seems counterintuitive, but it is the way to do it. So bring the panty up towards, or bring the pad up toward the underside of your panty, the crotch right there, okay? Then you're going to pull this into the leg opening and lay it on top of the panty. So this is going to, you know, be like this inside your panty, like this. Then you're going to bring the other one up and on top. Now you can see why we really want the bridge to be evenly, centered on both pads, because otherwise we would have one pad, that's up high and one that's down low. And that if these were uneven, this is going to want to start bunching up as we walk. So we don't want that happening. Okay? So this is how it's going to look. This is your panty. This is the outside. If you were the floor looking up as we pull up our panty, this is what you would see. The panty with the pads up inside next to the body. All right? We do not have the fleece next to the body. And notice how when the pad is laying flat, fleece side is up on both sides, or they're the same. Okay? We don't have, we don't want to do this. This isn't going to work, because what would happen, let's pin it and let's look and see what happens when we try to wear this now. So remember, we put our panty on. There's our panty. Pull this up into the leg hole. We would do that. We would be okay for the first part of the day. But when we go to switch, our absorbent layer is going to go down. That's not going to be good. Or we're forced to take that dirty pad off and flip it around, go like this. Now remember, this is the dirty side in our pretend scenario. When we put it down, look, the blood is going to bleed through our panty. This is bloody in our example here. This one's all bloody. We don't want that. So you really do need to have the fleece sides, let's call it in agreement. They're both going to be facing the same direction during sewing. Okay? They're both on the same side of the bridge, like this, facing up or facing down. Of course, when you're sewing the bridge on, they will both be facing up because you're going to put the bridge on this side of the pad. Okay? So I hope that makes sense, and I am excited to hear back how you find these to be working. I did have someone suggest that you take your fleece, your micro toweling, whatever it is you're using, and run it under water and see how long it takes before you would have any breakthrough. And that would give you a gauge for coverage and its effectiveness as a barrier. So I think that's a pretty good suggestion. Not all fleeces are made the same. They don't all have the same fiber content. They don't all have the same density. So let's just make sure that we're using one that is dense enough for the job. So again, for a light bleeder, it's probably not as critical, especially when you're using the H-style, because they have got double the protection. They have 2 layers of that barrier. So, they're very well covered. But if you're making single pads for those who just need one pad and they don't need to have that backup, well, then you're going to want to make sure that your fleece stands up to that water test, okay? Now, they'll all eventually break through, but who among us bleed as fast as a faucet, right? So, just a tip. Enjoy the video. I hope it was helpful, and I look forward to seeing some of your work. Thank you.